Good morning and welcome to Counterpoints. How you doing, Emily?
I'm good. Cold, but good.
So we've got the world on the cusp of World War III, and we've got big news out of all three branches of the federal government today. I also did an pre-interview yesterday with Guillaume Long, a former foreign minister of Ecuador, that will play either later today or later this week. But we're not going to be able to talk at length about the Supreme Court today, which is hearing a case that could upend basically everything. So tell us a little bit about that before we get into the rest.
So Chevron deference is essentially what's on the table at the Supreme Court oral arguments
That means
today.
basically the ability of the administrative state to administer
Right.
state.
Right, yeah. So the Supreme Court decided a long time ago that deference, if there is no clear direction from Congress, then the federal agencies have deference to essentially make their rules
Right.
for how things run. So what's on the table, for example, in this case, is some herring fishermen off in New Jersey. There are federal mandates that say you have to pay for federal observers. And they're challenging that because it's just I think it's an EPA. Either way, it's one of the cabinet agencies' rules. They don't want to have to pay for the federal observers. So that's what's getting tangled up. There's something called major questions doctrine, which I know you know about.
Made up doctrine, yeah.
Also says that but this is not a major question, is the point. And that's why it's made its way to the Supreme Court. This is something that the Federal Society has been salivating over, maybe literally, for a very long time. I hope Chevron deference falls. I know Ryan and I disagree on that, but it does basically undo everything. I will say I've talked to lawyers, even like sort of Federal Society aligned conservative lawyers, who actually don't think that if this is overturned, which given the makeup of the court, it looks like it will be overturned. We'll see more in the oral arguments today. I've talked to lawyers, though, who say basically it's not that big of a deal, that it's not the sort of 1-2 punch that conservatives think it is if Chevron's overturned, because now there are so many different other machinations and things that are baked into the cake, essentially.
I would just say be careful what you wish for, because the administrative state is what stitches together all of the laws. And if you get rid of those laws, you know who would love that? Plaintiffs' lawyers.
That's absolutely true.
Because then they are completely unshackled and they can sue the heck out of everybody.
And monopolistic corporations. I mean, it definitely, there's a lot on the table in the oral arguments today. So we'll be covering those in the future for sure. The decision, of course, will come down in June.
Very end of the show, we're going to have Sam Gadoldig, a Republican lobbyist, and Mike Williams, a Democratic lobbyist, with what I think is going to be a fascinating conversation. You're going to want to stick around for that. I've got an interesting story that I'll talk about later in the show, that the Ukrainian military is now using ibogaine, an extremely powerful hallucinogen, in microdoses to treat both traumatic brain injury and also for battle readiness. This is new reporting I've got over in The Intercept. It's kind of Ukrainians on ibogaine versus Russians on meth, is how one of my sources described it. So that's where we are at this point with that one.
Can't wait for that segment. It's really interesting reporting. Ryan, we are talking about the Republican primary, a horrible dispute happening at the southern border with the Texas government and the federal government. We're going to talk about updates from Israel. Let's start, though, with the Houthis. Yeah.
So there were we can put this first element up, fresh U.S. airstrikes. This is the third launched against the Houthis, coming at the same time as the United States is designating the Houthis as a terror organization, which we'll talk about later in this segment. There's this thinking among kind of American policymakers that all of the bombing of Yemen during the Obama administration didn't do it. All of the bombing of Yemen during the Trump administration through Saudi Arabia and the UAE, that didn't get the job done. And what we need now is just a little bit more bombing of Yemen, and that's going to solve the crisis.
Well, and you said something interesting there, which is a little bit more bombing, right? Because this is not, and to the dismay of some people,
this is not Gaza-level bombing.
No, and so, yeah, exactly. So it's this, again, it's a tit-for-tat retaliation, basically, that, to your point, comes on the heels of years. And it's after October 7th now, so obviously things have changed a bit, but it's not an all-out, full-scale, and that's where it sort of becomes, again, we talked about this yesterday for the Biden administration, what is the end goal of the bombing?
Right, because a full-scale invasion of Yemen and occupation of Sana'a in order to stop attacks on the Red Sea is obviously not in the cards.
No, nobody's even talking about it.
And so if all the Houthis need is access to a couple of missiles and a couple of drones to continue to threaten shipping, no amount of bombing is going to stop that. In fact, it's absurd. Like the more, we could put up A3 real quickly, just jump to this one and then we'll go back to A2. So Shell announced that it is shockingly suspending Red Sea shipments amid a war. Like, so we are escalating a war, launching regular airstrikes and expecting that somehow, as a result of that, shipping companies are going to be like, oh, cool, we're good now.
Yeah.
As long as like the war is hotter and wider, then yeah, we'll send our ships through here.
Right.
When these shipping companies, like, they actually don't care that much. Like, if they have to go around the Horn of South Africa, they'll charge more. The people who get charged more on the other end are the ones that are going to start complaining. And also, obviously, all of the Israeli shipping companies in the ports that are now, mostly idling and sitting empty. It's grinding significant elements of the Israeli economy to a halt as a result of this.
I was going to say the journal notes around 12% of total global seaborne oil trade goes through the Red Sea.
Right. So then that is eventually going to drive up prices, and that's what the U.S. is responding to, which is why the U.S. called its operation Prosperity Guardian.
Prosperity Guardian, yeah.
They then subsequently said that they didn't need congressional authorization for airstrikes on Yemen because they were defensive in action. But defensive against what? It's defensive of the global economy, not of the United States. And you also can't. I've heard people say, "Well, they attacked one of the ships." Well, you're not allowed to introduce a ship into hostilities and then have that ship receive hostile fire and then say, okay, well, now we have to defend ourselves. Like, that's not an end run around Article 1 of the Constitution, which gives Congress the authority to declare war.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely not. Let's put A2 back up on the screen here. What you're going to see, Ryan, can you tell us actually a little bit about this? This is the response actually from the Houthis. And if you're listening to this podcast, what you're seeing is a literal Red Sea, an animation of a literal Red Sea, and ships burning in the sea and over sunset. You're also seeing a Houthi rebel who's gone majorly viral. The meme calls him Tim Houthi Chalamet because it kind of looks like Timothy Chalamet, actually, right?
It does.
But tell us what we're seeing from propaganda channels here.
So the first thing is the Houthis have been very clear that they want this. Like they are eager to have the United States launching a handful of airstrikes at them. It is because it is useful to them domestically and regionally.
Validating.
Yeah, domestically, since the ceasefire with Saudi Arabia, that means the Yemeni public now has other demands of the government, their de facto government, that the situation improve. And that's kind of, for a lot of kind of rebel or revolutionary forces, that part of the process is less interesting, like than the actual fighting part. When you are at war with a hated rival, it's much easier to govern domestically. And so you've seen now the Yemeni public rally behind the Houthis in a way they hadn't since, say, the 2015, 2016 era. At the same time, regionally, polls among Palestinians and also around the Middle East are showing that the Houthis are now, like, by far the most popular kind of regional actors. So they have a lot of their own interests. What's new about this, I can't remember this happening in a conflict before, is the way that the Western public is so readily able to identify with the people that are supposed to be the adversaries. You see it certainly in Gaza with all of these kind of Palestinian journalists becoming kind of influencer level celebrities on Instagram and TikTok, and that allows the kind of Western public to identify personally with a lot of with real people who are under attack. Now you've seen the Houthis take this really interesting social media strategy where they're engaging directly with an American audience. Like, they will say, "Death to America," but you're cool. Mm-hmm. Like, you are not. We do not consider you America. You're American, but the government does not represent your values. And they have been encouraged by this by a response from an American public that is like you've had a lot of people saying thank you Houthis for like standing up against what Israel is doing in Palestine, and they seem encouraged by that. This one seems to go a little bit off the rails because now you've got this American public just going gaga over this like super hot Houthi sailor. He even responded.
And by the way, I mean, like all of that is just incredibly dangerous.
And he's objectively hot, though, right? I mean, he's hot.
You're into Tim Houthi.
Yeah, this guy's hot. Yeah, I mean, there's just no
he's a
question
good-looking
about
guy. Yeah, he's a very good-looking guy.
He's a good-looking dude. Now, Newsweek called him. The Newsweek headline was "Hot Houthi pirate becomes online sensation." God, you're beautiful. I object to the pirate part because they are a de facto government carrying out a government policy. Whether you like the government policy or not, or support it, don't support it, it's not piracy. Like they're not grabbing ships and like keeping the stuff and selling it.
It's not extra governmental.
Other than the fact that they are not the recognized government yet, but they are the recognized negotiating partner in governmental negotiations with Saudi Arabia, for instance.
Actually, I haven't ever had to parse the definition of pirate quite like this.
Right,
it's genuinely an interesting question.
This is brand new.
Genuinely interesting question. I mean, but this is incredibly dangerous. I get it. I understand the social media back and forth. And in fact, Ryan, he responded. Did he not?
Yeah, he said he's on Twitter because a lot of the Houthis are on social media. And he wrote, this is rough Google translation, but he wrote, responding to the Newsweek article, "I did not talk about beauty or anything else, but our issue is Palestine, and this is not the time to talk about beauty. I hope that my message will reach you, a free Palestine, and we will ignite it against the Israeli aggression that violates human rights." I was going through the replies to that, and I saw a lot of people saying, "You're so right. Give me a call. Let's talk about that."
Give me a call.
Yeah. Just call me. You're right.
Yeah, DM for signal.
Outrageous that people are objectifying you. Call me. Yeah.
It sort of reminds me of when like a model tries to post a political opinion, and I'm not comparing him to a model because obviously he's a political actor and not a model, but it reminds me of that when people can't get past how hot the person delivering the political message is. That happens to the best of us.
Yeah. So the United States, we can put up this next element, United States A4, has designated this guy and everybody else associated with the Houthis as a foreign terrorist, now not organization. So this tweet that we have up there says, sources tell Fox, the Biden administration is expected to redesignate the Houthis as a terrorist organization after formally removing the group from the FTO list in 2021. They're actually putting them on a slightly separate foreign terror list. They held a press call last night where they announced this decision, and basically what they're allowing 30 days. So it'll start from 30 days from today, they will get this foreign terror designation. The main kind of consequence of that decision will be that it will be very hard for the Saudi-Yemeni peace talks to conclude, because the number one thing that the Yemenis want out of the Saudi peace talks is their money back. Basically, Saudi Arabia has had access to a lot of Yemeni money, basically their bank accounts, and they've seized it. And so Yemeni teachers, policemen, firefighters, public workers, and also soldiers have not been paid. And there have been for years now, and it has furthered this humanitarian crisis inside Yemen. And so the main demand has been, we want the money. For a while, the Saudis were saying, well, we'll pay some of the teachers, but we're not going to pay the police. No. And then eventually they're like, okay, we'll pay the police, but we're not going to pay the soldiers. And then eventually they're like, okay, we actually will pay the soldiers. Like, because the Houthis are like, no, we're the government. You're recognizing us as a government. You have to give us all of our money. If they're listed as a terror organization, they can't receive that money. At the same time, it will exacerbate the humanitarian crisis. And there was a really interesting kind of element of this when the U.S. announced it, where they said that they're taking unusual and almost unique precautions to try to prevent these sanctions that they're applying to hurt the Yemeni civilian population, because they are so aware of the current crisis that the Yemeni civilians are operating in. But to me, that is a rare admission that sanctions actually do hurt the civilian population, because normally the line from the State Department is sanctions only target the elites. They don't actually hurt people. But if they have to make kind of special carve-outs for this, why would it be the case that other sanctions in the past have been different? Finally, and then get your response to this, the fact that it's taken 30 days, they said that's so that they can work out all of the logistics of this so it has the least amount of harm to Yemeni civilians.
Right.
But the Houthis have said that the attacks will stop and the Red Sea traffic can flow when the Israel-Gaza war ends. The U.S. says it wants this war to end. So the fact that they're not even implementing these sanctions for another 30 days suggests the U.S. doesn't have any optimism that it's going to be able to get Israel to stop this assault.
They should pressure, and I know that we've talked before about how it's less clear-cut because even Hamas doesn't know perhaps where all the hostages are. The Houthis should, of course, if they want to stop the blockade, they should pressure Hamas to release the hostages, which would be a huge step towards peace.
Which there is news on that this morning. I don't know if you saw this report. Qatar is very close to brokering another deal between Hamas and Israel. There was a small deal made that in exchange for more humanitarian aid getting into Gaza, that they're bringing medicine to the hostages. Like that's kind of one of the macabre deals that was just struck.
Bargaining chip, yeah.
And that's part of this latter deal toward a bigger kind of hostage release that could be coming very soon. But you're right that the Houthis. The Houthis are trying to use what leverage they can to pressure Israel to end this, and it would. We'll see if this hostage deal comes through. The fighting that we're seeing last night and yesterday in Israel in southern Gaza, residents there are reporting it's like nothing they've seen the entire time. We've been hearing from Israel that they're moving soon to a lower phase of this conflict, but the descriptions of the airstrikes coming out of southern Gaza from last night and this morning were extremely intense. Hamas's Telegram channel putting up lots of different reports of all sorts of battles throughout southern Gaza. BBC reporting that Israel is closing in on Al-Nasser Hospital, which is one of the few hospitals that in southern Gaza that remains kind of a refuge for probably thousands of people at this point. Israel also struck a Jordanian field hospital in Gaza, and so Jordan has now angrily responded to that, accusing Israel of violating the humanitarian law and laws of war. You can't strike another country's field hospital, and threatening not military retaliation, but threatening political repercussions. And Jordan did not want to be in this situation. Like at the very beginning, Jordan was actually kind of sending supplies and such, like to. I don't want to talk about the details because I'll get it wrong. But Jordan was kind of caught cooperating with Israel, and in response to that, kind of signed on to the South African complaint. They had better relations. Now, Israel's like attacking their field hospital and they're denouncing them. It's like really spiraling.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.